Yes, first of all, a bit of background. Alex Salmond was cleared of all the criminal charges he faced. He's now pursuing the idea that he was the victim of a political conspiracy, and that's spilled over to some extent into the Holyrood inquiry, which is investigating the Scottish Government's botched handling of earlier harassment complaints against Mr. Salmond. Now, the woman I've spoken to, who can't be named for legal reasons, she says that the committee is becoming a political fight, that it's exploiting the experiences of complainers and making it harder for others to come forward and report allegations of bullying and harassment. She actually goes as far, Martin, as saying that she finds the conduct of this committee more traumatic than giving evidence in the High Court. Now, we'll have a response to that from the committee convener after we hear from the woman herself, and we have altered her voice and her appearance to protect her identity.
One of the hardest things about becoming involved in an issue like this, reporting incidents to the police and becoming involved in a High Court trial, is that actually your voice is almost taken away from you. When something is so high profile and you have endless commentary on this for years, it's a scary thing to speak up.
The background is there was a criminal trial and Alex Salmond was acquitted of all charges he faced. When he and his supporters talk about a conspiracy, does that claim have some merit?
It is utterly absurd to suggest that 9 women could be persuaded to lie to the police, to perjure themselves in court. I mean, the truth is that we individually had experiences of Alex Salmond's behaviour.
As somebody who was pursuing a complaint, did you discuss that with others who, in the end, became part of the criminal trial?
I think it's natural to discuss issues of sexual assault, sexual harassment with women that you worked with at the time.
Is it possible that to some, what looks like a conspiracy is something quite different?
I think that, as the committee had said last week, when seeing the texts and what was said within them, they were shocked and they were very clear that this was women supporting other women.
And what does this feel like from the point of view of somebody who has pursued a complaint? This is constantly in the headlines. There are constant claims and counterclaims being made, and this is also, whatever else it is, a very big political clash.
Yeah, it's actually in many ways more traumatic than the experience of the High Court trial.
More traumatic?
I think so, because you actually now have what was a glimmer of hope in a committee, thinking that they could be impartial, that they could properly investigate the government, that they could contribute towards ensuring that sexual harassment and bullying in the workplace was no longer an issue. Instead, what has happened is they have taken your very personal experiences and they have exploited them for their own self-serving political interests. And that, in and of itself, is something that's really traumatic.
Exploited how?
Well, for example, believing firsthand without any real assessment that this is a conspiracy, and they have turned this into a political fight when really this should be about ensuring that the workplace can be safe for women in Scotland.
So all of this began with 2 complaints from female civil servants about Alex Salmond's behaviour to the Scottish Government, and as we know, it used a new process and made a mistake in how that was applied. How do you reflect on that?
It takes a lot of courage to report sexual harassment, particularly against a very powerful person. I think the fact that the government were willing to investigate those complaints is positive, but clearly they let down those women and they have a responsibility to fix that for anybody else in the future.
But we're talking about something that has been dragging on for more than 2 years since they lost the case in the civil court. Hasn't it been fixed yet?
From what I can see, it hasn't been fixed yet. And I think the thing that's really disappointing, particularly through the committee process, is that the fact that committee members have turned this into a political fight has effectively allowed the government to get away with not being properly scrutinised by members on its procedures.
It was obviously a big decision for you to make a complaint. Do you think that women are more or less likely to do that now than they were before all of this?
Much less likely. I think that this has made it much harder for women to be believed and for women to be able to come forward.
Do you think the committee is able to conclude the inquiry that it set out for itself in a satisfactory way?
I think the committee has strayed so far from its own remit that it has made any of its findings completely useless. I think that they really had an opportunity to ensure that they could investigate the creation of procedures that would make it safe and easy for women to come forward, and they have made it significantly harder.
Some tremendously powerful testimony there, Glenn. It's going to focus a few minds, that, isn't it?
I think it is an important interview because while we hear from Alex Salmond, his lawyers, supporters, and we hear from Nicola Sturgeon and key officials in her government and in her party, the SNP, we really haven't heard very much from those who raise complaints about Alex Salmond's behaviour. Now, some people will look at that and say, well, that's quite right. They had their say in the High Court and the jury decided that Alex Salmond should be acquitted on all charges. But he has pursued a complaint since then that he's the victim of a political conspiracy, and the women feel that they are being implicated in that. So that is one reason that this one woman decided to speak up today. Of course, in doing so, she's made very strong criticism of the Holyrood Committee, saying that it is exploiting the experiences of women. And that's criticism I put directly to the committee convener, the SNP MSP, Linda Fabiani.
I'm very, very sad to hear that, but I understand it. We are talking here about vulnerable women, and it's very hard to hear that. I think we have to accept that as the case. All that I can say to that is, again, the Parliament charged this committee with a job to do, and we have to do that job.
Would you like to say sorry?
Yes, absolutely. Of course I would. I am really sorry that people feel that way, that these women feel that way. Absolutely sorry. And I can only apologise for myself. I can't apologise for anybody else. That's up to them. I absolutely apologise for the way that things have gone. That makes any complainant feel that we have exploited them. I don't know what else I can say.
That's an apology, a personal apology from Linda Fabiani. It's not on behalf of the whole committee, and it may be other perspectives emerge from inside the committee as the day goes on. There was also criticism in the original interview of the Scottish Government for not having fixed their complaint handling procedure. The government says that it wants to learn lessons, not least from whatever the committee finds and from an independent review by a QC. Worth remembering too, Martin, what this committee is for. It is not investigating Alex Salmond's conduct. It is not revisiting his trial. It is specifically looking into what Nicola Sturgeon and her government messed up in their earlier investigation into 2 harassment complaints to the government about Alex Salmond. Remember, he successfully challenged their legal process in court and was awarded more than £500,000 in legal costs. The committee is also looking to see how Nicola Sturgeon's conduct measures up against the rules under which ministers are supposed to operate, and there is a separate, perhaps more forensic, look at that underway by Ireland's former Chief Prosecutor, James Hamilton. So what started with complaints about Alex Salmond is now heavily focused on how his successor handled those complaints, and of course, all of this has torn apart their once close relationship.
Indeed, hasn't it just? All right, I'm sure more reaction to that interview in the days to come, but thank you for that context, Glenn Campbell, our political editor there. Right, this is The Sunday Show. We are broadcasting on